agreements yet on how security would be established, but we have been putting proposals forward. Our Arab partners have been putting proposals forward. We've been talking through what various countries might or might not be willing to do, what they would need from other parties to secure their agreement, to participate, and those are ongoing conversations.
And who are the other countries who are ready to send troops other than?
So I didn't stipulate that any one country was ready to send troops. That was the stipulation of your question, not something I said from here. I'm certainly not going to speak for any country at all in the region.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you. Going back to Netanyahu's speech to Congress, actually. So Prime Minister said specifically with regards to Rafah, and I quote, practically no civilians killed in Rafah. And it got actually standing ovation from US Congress. And you hear, I know it's different branches, State Department and Congress, and you hear acknowledging thousands of civilians, innocent civilians were killed by this as a result of this military campaign. So I'm wondering, do you think your statements here and that Congress's reaction to Netanyahu's remarks, and it was a false claim verifiable by various respectable news organizations, including ones in the United States, sending maybe conflicting messages to the rest of the world with regards to what US really wants and how it approaches to this conflict?
So again, we don't speak for Congress,
yeah,
and Congress doesn't speak for us. Mm-hmm. And I hope most people around the world would understand that, and understand that we are a big democracy with people with a host of different views from all sides of the political spectrum. There are people inside the Congress, including people who are at the speech today, who strenuously support everything that Israel has done. And there are other members of Congress, including some who are making their views known in the chamber, who strenuously oppose things that Israel does. That's part of what being in a democracy does. I speak on behalf of the executive branch, and I'll continue to make our views known on policy matters. I'll continue to make our views known about the facts of what has happened in Gaza and where we ought to go from here. When it comes to civilian casualties in Rafah, of course, there have been civilian casualties in Rafah. We have all seen verified reports of civilian casualties during the conflict there. Now, one thing that is true, the number of civilian casualties in the Rafah campaign is significantly lower than the number of human casualties in the campaign in Gaza City and in the campaign in Khan Yunis. We think that's for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that a number of people in Rafah evacuated sooner or early in the campaign, before the campaign really began in earnest. Another of the reasons we think is that we were pushing Israel to execute a more limited campaign than what they did in Gaza City and what they did in Khan Yunis, and they ultimately did that. But of course, there were still civilians that died in Rafah, and every civilian death is a tragedy.
And I understand you're speaking on behalf of the United States. So should when you are saying we are a big democracy, different branches, so Congress's reaction to Netanyahu's speech, doesn't that represent what the United States want with regards to what Israel wants in that conflict? 535
members of Congress. They don't all have the same view, and each one of them has a vote and has a voice in what Congress does. And some of them share the views of the administration. Some of them don't, to put matters lightly. And they have all sorts of different views. So people, I think, when making assessments about what the United States believes, they got to look at, when you want to make an assessment about what the executive branch believes, you can look at what the president says, the secretary says, and what I say. When you want to look to what Congress believes, you have to look at what they say, but ultimately how they vote.
Yeah, thank you. Because I wanted to ask, because Turkish foreign minister just harshly criticized the U.S. Congress's reaction to Netanyahu. I wonder, since the ceasefire talks are ongoing, I wonder whether, do you find those maybe false claims made by Netanyahu towards Congress somehow troubling with regards to ceasefire talks?
I don't assess that anything the Prime Minister said yesterday is going to have an impact on the ceasefire talks one way or the other.
Thank you.
Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. I have several topics, but before that, let me follow up on the Masa Act, which just said, which is about sanctioning Iranian leadership for gross human rights violations. The other day, in response to Michelle's question, in fact, on different occasions, you said that you believe Iranian supreme leader is in charge of decision-making process. Do you have any doubt in your mind that Iranian leaders are responsible for the killing of Masa and others?
Obviously, the government of Iran is responsible for all the actions that the regime takes.
Then why is the U.S. government so reluctant to impose human rights sanctions on Iranian supreme leader?
Alex, I love you and I have often tangled over this question when we've talked about it in the context of Russia, where you will often seize on one particular action that you wish that the United States would take and ignore the vast sea of other actions that we have taken. When it comes to Iran, we have imposed over 600 sanctions and export controls for Iran's behavior across a wide range of areas, including their support for terrorism, including their hostile actions to their neighbors, and of course, including for their brutal crackdown on human rights at home. And I think you can expect to see us continue to take those actions. But as you've also heard me say before, I'm never going to engage with you on one specific proposed sanction because we don't preview those in advance for, I think, very good reasons.
I mean, so it's not me, it's the law of the land. The U.S. Congress is asking the U.S. government to take this action. Moving to Russia and Ukraine. So Romania has confirmed that more Russian drones showed up in its airspace. 3 Shaheds only from last night. Does this require decisive action or response from NATO?
So I'm not going to speak to that matter only because there is still an ongoing investigation into what exactly happened and how it might happen, how it might have happened, and I think it's not appropriate for me to comment on it in advance. But obviously, we fully support all of our NATO allies. The president has made that clear from the outset of this conflict and from the outset of the administration.
Is there any discussion going behind the scene between the allies? And
I'm never going to talk about private
So,
discussions. Alex, I'm going to move on only because I got to leave in
last topic.
I have to leave in 9 minutes. I see a number of people with their hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. On student visas and Iranian, schools are opening very soon, and there are so many Iranian students still waiting for their visas and clearances. Do you have any plans, any initiatives to expedite the process for these students?
So let me just say that every year we welcome thousands of Iranian students to college campuses and universities. We have very strong disagreements with the leadership in Tehran, but we have no quarrel with the Iranian people who are the victims of repression and victims of the brutal tactics by the Iranian regime. Let me just say, there were, just as a factual matter, there were 10,000 Iranian students who studied in the United States during the last academic year, up 16% from the year before, all of whom we granted visas to come and study in the United States. We do expect those numbers to increase over time, but as I've said before, when I've asked about similar matters, I think from Gita actually, I can't speak to the specifics of any one visa case or really any category of visa cases, other than to say that, every visa decision we make is a national security decision. Every prospective traveler has to go through it wasn't Saeed this time. Somebody's displaying their Google directions to get the hell out of here. I don't know who that is. Every visa applicant has to undergo extensive security screening. We take that incredibly seriously. We go through a thorough process before granting visas to individual, but we think it's important to grant those visas as expeditiously as possible. And I think that's been shown by the fact that we have granted so many visas to Iranian students, a number that has increased, as I said, from the 2 years ago to the previous year, and we expect to continue to increase.
So, but the State Department is precisely in charge of this. You don't have any plans specifically for Iranian students so that they won't miss the deadlines.
So as I just said, we have already seen let me say it a different way. The proof ultimately, I know we always get anecdotal cases that are put forward to us often in this briefing room, but the proof ultimately of how we're doing when it comes to looking at any matter can be in the data. And when you look at the data here, it shows that the number of students who have received visas from Iran has increased, and we expect it to continue to increase. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that every visa gets approved, and it certainly doesn't mean that every visa gets approved quickly, because sometimes they're just harder questions that we have to answer in doing our screening. But we do try to go through it as quickly as possible so we can get those visas approved. Yeah. Yeah.
Separate topic on journalist Asu Kamasheva. Has her conviction brought the State Department closer to designating her as wrongfully detained? And do you think that designation would have made her conviction less likely?
So first of all, it just has not been our experience in watching what Russia does that a wrongful detention determination has any impact on the decisions that they make to charge and ultimately convict people. That's to answer the second part of the question. With respect to the determination itself, all I can say is that's a decision that it's a determination that remains ongoing inside the State Department. But that this is a case that we take incredibly seriously. The Secretary himself is engaged on this case, and it takes it incredibly seriously, and we want to see her released.
And the second question, quickly, with President Biden saying that he's not seeking re-election, and with the two campaigns to replace him that seems to have different world views, how much should the United States be worried that its international adversaries are taking advantage of the perceived weakness between now and January?
So I would certainly, just as a message to any of those adversaries, that if they at all are thinking of taking advantage of the upcoming political transition in the United States, which is still 6 months away, they should think again, and they should be disabused of the notion that we are anything but focused on the national security challenges that the country faces, and that includes responding to our adversaries when appropriate. The president has made incredibly clear to the secretary and the rest of the national security team that he expects them to be focused for this next 6 months. That he expects them to advance the foreign policy objectives that he laid out from the outset of the administration and that we have put into place over the course of the last 3.5 years. He wants them to continue to try to advance those objectives over the next 6 months, and that he doesn't want anyone to take their eye off the ball at all, and I can guarantee you that we will not. Yeah.
On Sudan, the RSF has said it will participate in the talks in Switzerland in August. Have you gotten any response from this?
I do not have any update. As far as I'm aware, we have not yet gotten a response from the SAF. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. One on Ukraine and one on Russia. The Ukrainian parliament is preparing to consider a bill prohibiting the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in August. Are you aware of the bill, and do you have any comments?
I don't have any comment on the bill, no.
And my second question is about the new Arctic strategy unveiled on Monday by the Pentagon. The Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, said that Russia asserts excessive claims in the Arctic. Do you agree with this assessment, and can you explain maybe Are they excessive?
So I would, when it comes to an assessment made by the Pentagon, for any kind of detailed questions about that assessment, I would defer you to the Pentagon, who also holds a daily press briefing or press briefing several times a week to question in detail. But of course, we agree with the assessment made by the Pentagon. With that, I'm going to wrap for questions because I do have a plane to catch. But before I go, I just wanted to note that next week is the last week of our Director of Press Operations, Jennifer Williams. I'm not going to be here next week to note it because I'm going to be traveling with the Secretary, but I know all of you in the room have gotten to know her and seen what a great service she provides to the department and to her country. Agreed. Truly one of the best public servants I have worked with in my time in government. A real credit to her profession and a real credit to the department. And I'm going to miss working with you very much, but I certainly wish you well in your next assignment. I know you will continue to make us all proud. So thank you. With that, thanks everyone.